ChatGPT may seem like it's been part of our lives for ages, but the famous software you know as ChatGPT, which started as GPT-18, a name you've probably never heard of, was born in November 2022. So it has less than 4 years of history. GPT-5, which you can currently access for $20 a month, entered our lives on November 1st, 2024. These are not even yesterday's news, and the wave created by ChatGPT has spread to other large language models like Cloud and Lama, video production AI like Sora, and music production AI like Suno, changing everything. Have you ever wondered how all this works? How is it possible that a software not only understands what a photo it sees is about, but also solves the mathematical equation in that photo and verbally explains the solution to us? Or how is it possible that a software can simultaneously write a poem in the style of William Shakespeare and also have a command of physics at a level where it can teach quantum mechanics? What's going on under the hood? How does a machine learn anything at all? Let's take a look. Now let's learn how the artificial intelligence revolution is possible. Software or algorithms are essentially logical recipes that, like humans, never tire, never get bored, and are almost completely immune to error, producing the same output every time, no matter how many times you give them the same input. Think about calculators or tools like Excel. Even think about the URL bar you use to visit websites. If you typed google.com and it opened Wikipedia one day and Netflix the next, and you couldn't predict the result, you wouldn't be able to use that software, right? Or imagine your calculator giving a different result for the same operation every time. Software has given us incredible speed, but this rigid determinism in traditional software architectures has also limited the richness of the results produced. Yet what makes intelligence impressive is not rigidity, but flexibility and agility. To achieve this, we began developing more probabilistic, more statistical tools, and eventually the software we call artificial intelligence was born. These systems have a more stochastic or unpredictable nature. However, this unpredictability is adjustable and even triggerable. As a result, even though they produce different responses each time, the accuracy of their answers remains reasonably consistent, setting aside errors like hallucinations. So how is this possible? What does GPT mean? Those letters must have some meaning, right? GPT stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. Generative. Contrary to what some people claim, these artificial intelligences can produce original content, not just copy and paste. The term pre-trained refers to them being trained beforehand with a very large data set. Why trained? Because even though they are trained with large data sets for broad purposes, we can further develop them with extra training to perform more specific tasks if we wish. This is particularly problematic for high-level professions. The current incredible transformation is happening with artificial intelligence that has not been specifically trained to become, say, a doctor or an engineer. We will see together what happens when artificial intelligence trained entirely for medical purposes or trained in diplomacy or law arrives. Anyway, the last letter in GPT stands for transformer, and what is important in the current AI revolution is the T rather than the G or P in GPT. We will get to what that is, but first we need to go back to basics, because transformers, which correspond to that T, are essentially just a deep learning algorithm. Deep learning, a very popular term, is essentially a version of artificial neural networks. Artificial neural networks, as the name suggests, are a mechanism that mimics the neural networks in our brain, based on a system called the perceptron, first discovered in 1958. Therefore, to understand everything properly, we need to look at this first. In the brain, there are nerve cells called neurons. Other neurons connect to these neurons via projections called dendrites, and depending on the electrical signals coming from those neurons, certain biochemical changes occur in the neuron cell body. Based on these changes, the neuron generates its own electrical signal and transmits it along extensions called axons. We generally represent these signals as electrical impulses. Our neurons communicate with each other through bioelectrochemical signals. The axons of each neuron connect to the dendrites of other neurons, and this network within our brain can dynamically perform processes such as seeing, hearing, thinking, reasoning, and reflexes. Things like remembering, learning, and forgetting also occur as the connections and strengths of neurons within the network change over time. Artificial neural networks, which form the basis of artificial intelligence, are based on artificially recreating these neural networks. We generally represent these types of artificial networks with circles. The circles can be thought of as the processing cell bodies of neurons. Green neurons represent input neurons. These receive stimuli from outside, like sensory organs, and some of them become activated. The lines show the connections between each neuron. These lines take a value between 1 and 0 and represent the strength of the connection. The numbers on the neurons are the result of a simple mathematical operation. Each neuron multiplies the numbers it receives from the other neurons it is connected to by the weight of the connection between them and adds a fixed number called a bias to this product. The purpose of the bias is to set the firing threshold for each neuron. The result is normalized between 0 and 1 using the sigmoid function. How will we train this network? At first, the connections in our network are assigned completely randomly. What we mean by training machine learning or artificial intelligence is precisely changing the amount of those weights. Big data comes into play here. The data set to be used in training artificial intelligence contains the equivalence of handwritten characters carefully prepared by humans. The cleaner and more varied the data, the more accurate and intelligent our artificial intelligence becomes. At first, since the system is untrained, we get nonsensical answers. But with the backpropagation process, wrong answers are penalized and correct answers are rewarded. The connections between neurons are strengthened or weakened based on the accuracy of the network's response. The cost function comes into play to reward or penalize the machine. The untrained network randomly activates some neurons. The neuron corresponding to the displayed number should be active, while the others should remain inactive. The cost calculates the difference between the AI's prediction and what should actually be the case. The algorithm continuously tries to reduce the cost. In real artificial intelligence, this function can be tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, or even billions of dimensions. Gradient descent algorithms are like finding the lowest point in this complex terrain. What happens in the intermediate layers that allows the network to recognize numbers? Interestingly, we almost never know the answer to this question. That's why many artificial intelligence algorithms are known as black boxes. Inputs transform into correct outputs, but it's difficult to understand how. The intermediate layers may recognize certain unique characteristics of each number. For example, the number 9 consists of a circle and a tail. Over the years, countless layers have been added to this basic logic, producing much more advanced and complex models. Models such as convolutional neural networks, recurrent neural networks, and generative adversarial networks have been developed. High-level image generation tools such as Midjourney or Sora use diffusion models. All of them have a neural network structure under the hood. The transformer algorithm was developed in 2017. Attention draws inspiration from how children learn. Through embedding, artificial intelligence places words into a meaningful space. Tokens are divided into words, syllables, characters, or pixels and represented by multi-dimensional arrays of numbers. How ChatGPT works. Initially, GPT only completed a single sentence. Thanks to transformers, it can be adapted for chatbots and visual creators. Each word is selected by connecting to previous sentences. In photo or video generation, a similar logic is used to learn the relationships between pixels or frames. People sometimes underestimate artificial intelligence, but conversation or communication is essentially about choosing the most likely next move. GPT, which sparked the artificial intelligence revolution, was made possible thanks to this fundamental logic. It was Google, not OpenAI, that developed transformer technology. Although it started with the aim of developing Google Translate, it was soon realized that the same logic could also be used for chatbots, converting text to images, writing computer code with voice commands, and voice mimicry. Popular artificial intelligence systems such as GPT, DeepL, Stable Diffusion, Sora, and 11 Labs were made possible by looking at the human brain and adapting a simple copy of it to silicon chips. The idea of imposing a mechanism that works almost exactly like silicon chips, inspired by biology, is controversial. When we look at nature, the basic logic remains the same. but the architectures change fundamentally. Perhaps in another video, we will see what could happen if we allow machines to evolve on their own. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to keep this kind of content coming. See you next time.